Hey guys, welcome back to We Met at Acme. I'm so excited to be here with Neha Ruch, founder of Mother Entitled and author of The Power Pause. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. You're giving me a little bit of Mila
Oh,
Kunis.
I love when
Do you
people
get it all the
I
time?
do, but you can say it.
Yeah,
I'll take it anytime.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it, but also like your own version of it, like your own.
I mean, I want to be her version, but yes, I'll take her version.
Well, your version is stunning. So, we have so much to get into. I think we'll start with how we always start, which is what's your favorite romantic gesture?
I want people to tell me how great I am,
Mhm.
slash, I want Dan to tell me how great I am all
Mhm.
day long. I
Mhm.
want him to tell me I'm beautiful. I want him to
Mhm.
tell me I'm brilliant and the most amazing mother.
So
And
words of
yeah,
affirmation.
and that is not his love language.
Oh, what is his?
Acts of service.
Mhm.
Which was like a real learning curve because he would show up with breakfast in bed and I'd be like, just tell me I'm wonderful.
Right, right. That's
Mhm.
tough. How did you guys meet?
Our dads worked together in the 90s
Uh-huh.
and connected us for work, but did not mean to set us up.
That's really cute.
hmm
So your dads are matchmakers.
Our dads are matchmakers, but my husband is Jewish.
Mhm.
They did not want us to get married, so I converted. It was like
What
a big
what
deal.
were you raised as?
Nothing.
Okay.
Agnostic.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't like I was giving up anything, but it
Mhm.
was still an identity shift for everyone.
Yeah, I mean converting to Judaism is no joke.
No, but we had such a funny, I was listening to Erin Goldman's podcast with
Yeah.
you. I was laughing because she did the same thing we did. We got on a plane. And he was living in London and I was living in Boston. And we met in Spain for 5 days as our first date.
It's really cute.
So we sort of we took big leaps and it
That's
ended up working.
Yeah. I mean, that is for sure the exception, I just have to say to people listening, because, usually when you do
Maybe
this
don't go on a
grand
second date.
romantic gesture, it blows up in your face. But then there's that once in, 100 chances that it's your husband and you live happily
Mhm.
ever after. And that's
Mhm.
amazing. And I'm just saying that as someone who I've tried the like first date in Denver kind of thing.
Yeah, how'd that go for you?
It was a second date, and, it was fun, but then I found out he had a girlfriend.
Yeah, not
So,
so fun.
yeah, not as fun, but I'm glad it worked out for you
Yeah,
because what a story.
it
I love it.
it's fun.
Um, let's I mean, there are so many questions that came in. So, basically, we had been connected by Nikki. Shout out to Nikki, our girl, love her. And I was so interested in what you do because I think that the whole subject of becoming a mom and having that identity shift is so big. It's so big. And the power pause, such a good idea because women need to read about what the hell they need to do next and
Mhm.
what they should do in that moment. And just everyone is always feeling a type of way and not understanding what direction to go in after they become a mom, whether they want to admit that or not. And
Mhm.
maybe some people aren't. Some people are very lucky and have a good setup. I will say I'm one of them. I can work from home and can go into the studio, and I feel like I'm not completely missing out.
Mhm.
And that's the dream. And I know on the Mother Untitled website, you guys have like you share jobs where people can have more flexibility and things like that. So that's an amazing resource. What was your own situation? And I know it from talking with you, but for our listeners, that made you decide, I want to talk about this space?
Well, let me first say, I think that your situation is starting to become more normal
Mm-hmm.
and more common than it was 9 years ago when I had Bodhi.
Right.
I think that there are more women who are trying to set themselves up for success, which means carving out their own work opportunities, right? And I, when flashback to 9 years ago, I was at on paper the height of my career. I was actually working right around the corner from here at Zola. I ran brand there. I just graduated Stanford Business School. Expectations on my career were really high. And then I had my first kid and I was rocking in that white rocking chair and thinking, oh, this is what it feels like to not have to try so hard. Like I'm not trying to climb anymore. And maybe it was in part I had been feeling like, is this it with work for a while? And then this kid came along and I was suddenly interested in like how his little brain was working and how to make him sleep and how to get him to feed and like what are the other moms doing? And I was suddenly curious again, which I'd been missing for a long time.
Mm.
And so I initially downshifted to consulting. Eventually I'd pause. But as soon as I made a shift away from my work, I started hearing from everyone like, this is what you're going to do. You're just going to give up. You're going to be bored all day. And I was meeting all these incredible women who, like me, lived in the area, who had clocked in 10 years in their careers, who had equitable relationships with their partners, like their husbands were spending time, like they weren't serving them cocktails at the end of the day.
Right.
And they had access to tools and technology, and they were working on projects alongside, and none of it matched the stereotype of the stay-at-home mom. But it was the height of the lean in movement. So everywhere I looked, there was great content for the quote unquote working mother, but it counted anyone else out.
Hmm.
And so I started it as a project then, and I've been growing it since.
It's so awesome. And just, you know, I love that it's not black and white. Like,
Mhm.
it's not like you're either a stay-at-home mom or you're a working mom. You can figure out a way to make it work. You can come back. You can go in and out. And people are terrified of that. They don't think that that's a possibility. And all these questions came in, and I feel like we just need to like go in there and tackle them. And the first question, which I feel like you can answer really well, at least for your experience, is how do you know if the stay-at-home mom life is for you?
Mm. There's something to be said for gut intuition on what's working for you and your family, right? Which is to say, initially, I didn't think a full pause was going to work. That's why I downshifted to 2 days a week out of the home. And it was a bit of a trial period, both financially as well as emotionally, to see, how I was going to feel the rest of the week full time at home. And I turned out those rest of the days at home, I found a rhythm that worked for us. I was meeting interesting women. Maybe that was where I lived in the city, but it sounds like that's mirrored no matter where you live. And I felt inspired and interested, and I wanted more of that. And so it was a bit of a test and learn, but it was also a bit of intuition of there was something I was seeking for that moment. My husband happened to be running a tech company at the time, and so I knew he wasn't going to be really available, for the doctor's appointments and the things that naturally come up and demand time and attention. And so it worked for us financially, it worked for our family from a stress level, and it worked for me personally. But it was both intuition and it was temporary. And I think that's the other piece of it, which is when we talk about answering that question, what do you do? Which I'm sure is going to come up. I always lead with right now, because whatever choice you're making, you can take it in a small increment of time. If you're testing part time, can you do that for like a 6 month period? Even presenting it to your manager as like, this is 6 months. Or can you take it 1 year with you and your partner and budgeting for something and say, let's come back and re examine it in 1 year? It doesn't all have to be permanent and finite.
Mhm. And if you're open to sharing, like, how was it working for you financially? And I think
Mm.
that's, like, a really big thing that people need to be talking about more. I have a friend who is starting to slowly transition out of her job into being a stay-at-home mom, but also with help, and we'll get into that.
Mhm.
Um, and, I haven't her husband's in finance, and I think he makes a great living, and I imagine that's the reason, which is why I'm not like, "So wait, how is this gonna work for you?" But it is a question that everyone wants to know, and it's like, how do you know that you can do that financially, especially living in a city like New York City or wherever?
I'll start with this. I think even if it's a financial no brainer, our generation has been raised to believe that if we give up our income, we're giving up power. And so, no matter who you are and whether it's a privilege to not have to worry about this, there is a fear that's universal of giving up your financial independence.
Mhm.
And I get a lot into that in the book in terms of setting up the conversations with your partner to preempt that. A lot of it starts with, so I mentioned my husband was running a tech company at the time. To his credit, he ran our home even before we had kids, like a organization. He took the P&L from his business and applied it to our house. So every top of the year, we would get together and say, this is the money in, this is the money we project out. There were categories we assigned budgets toward, whether that was dining out or travel. And then it became a childcare line item. So we started realizing like how much would, when we had Bodhi, how much would it cost to pay for childcare? And so all of this was laid out for us. And then we started having conversations about what would it look like for me to downshift. Once that happened, there were some adjustments we were making. What would it look like to draw down from our savings? We started preparing for to my shift to full-time on pause 6 months out, which I recommend to everyone. If you're planning for a career shift of any point, have the conversation with your partner, create a budget. If you don't have one already, ideally you're sharing finances, that we can get into that, but that is like the recommendation if someone's taking a career shift in the household. Start deciding together what the budget adjustments are that you're going to make this happen, and make sure that they're not applying in any one direction. But number one, take this position of this is an interdependent household, and the person working in the home is providing value that the person working out of the home is depending on too, right? To be able to single task. My husband fully was not able to run that tech company without me being able to take on the emotional and intellectual labor that was happening in the house, and we believed that. And so I think that was part one, and that applies to anyone. In full transparency for us, we knew we had a financial security net of loving family and savings that we could draw down from to
Mhm.
make this happen. And we were able to set ourselves increments of time to come back and re examine the systems. In the book, I talk about sort of in that second chapter, the range of options we see. We see women moving across the country from San Diego to Virginia to make this possible for their family. We see other people who just cut out the travel for the year. Whatever happens in whatever um, financial situation you're in, making that decision together is imperative.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it's really great that you touched upon the fact that your husband recognized that what you are doing is a job and what he is doing is a job. And I think that is tough. And actually one woman wrote in um that she said um how to help your partner see that being a stay-at-home mom, aka cooking, cleaning, taking care of kids, is a full-time job. And that made me
Mm.
sad to read because I'm like, how could he not see that? My husband went back to work a week after I had my son, but he's around on the weekends. He sees that it is full hands-on. I mean, especially at the age we are now, but I think every age is hands-on in a lot of ways. When they're younger, it's the schedule is more demanding. When they're older, they're running around, you're running after them. It's always a hands-on crazy 24, like you can't look away.
Mm-hmm.
And so my husband immediately knows that he knows why I'm not a stay-at-home mom, because I feel that it's honestly too hard. It's honestly too hard. Like, that is my true thought process. And that doesn't and, like, that's a whole other conversation, but he understands that it's a full-time job. So I don't understand how anyone could not understand that.
Because our culture has assigned so little value to it, and it assigns so much value to paid work,
Yeah.
that the discrepancy is the power chasm is so large, and it's
Mhm.
so wired in our culture, and it's taking so much to rewire that. And I do think we're making strides, right? I think Eve Rodsky's work in Fair Play is tremendous, and I highly recommend that to new parents, to be able to lay out these are the tasks that go into not just raising a child, but running a home
That's a
and
book, you
building.
said?
Fair Play by Eve
Okay.
Rodsky, highly recommend it.
Uh-huh.
Because I think she really paved the way for this work, actually, because she was able to lay out the economic value of household care. And it came at a time in 2020 when we all came face to face with the reality that, like, oh, caregiving is actual work. And by the way, there's a childcare crisis. So childcare is so expensive. So when we start to lay out the numbers, I mean, there's data to show that if a woman was compensated, or a man, for the day-to-day of at-home parenting, it would be $184,000 a year,
I feel
right?
like minimum. Because
Minimum.
it's not the same as having a nanny who works certain hours.
And who can turn
You
off, you don't stop.
Correct. You're
And
not off and you cannot leave.
so, the government's not gonna pay that at any time, but in the book, we share scripts to be able to have that dialogue with your partner, to be able to, as part of that planning process, say, this is how much it would cost. These are all the other hidden tasks that we need to be able to do. These are the values we want in our home. Maybe we want less stress, and your job is really demanding. And right now, we don't see a world where we could run a calm household at the pace we're living in, right? Whatever those conversations are, you want to make sure that that value is seen, and that you're each recognizing the contribution, because later, and we'll get into help, but later when you say, like, I can't work 24/7 without breaks, that partner knows that at the end of a workday, whatever that workday looks like, you're both contribute taking on the household responsibilities, right? It's not just on that home parent to default do everything. On the weekends, you both deserve to be whole and supported. So, we lead with the financial conversation because that is foundational in knowing you're both valued contributors. If there is a marriage in which that is not clear, and and again, I mean, Tracy Dagliash, who's a great relationship therapist that I interviewed for this chapter, said, you start having those conversations, you'll know very quickly if this is a safe and secure relationship where you're going to be respected even if you part with your pay. If that is not the case, you can move forward in considering a contract. We lay out the ideas about a postnuptial agreement so that you know that your interests are protected, and you can sort of take that off the table so you can work on shoring up your marriage. Or there's a world where it might not be a safe time to be disconnecting from your income entirely, and maybe you consider a downshift or flexible work, so that you can stay connected to income without taking a full break, because there
Because
is a reality.
Do you mean in that case, like if your relationship isn't strong?
If your relationship is not only not strong, but if you feel like there is a risk in which your work isn't going to be valued, and you are not going to feel safe to be able to use the household income, which is shared, right? Household income is shared in your household organization. You are contributing, your partner working for pay is contributing, he or she is depending on you for doing all of this unpaid work in the home.
Mhm.
You're equally dependent. But if you don't feel like you're going to be able to access that household income based on commentary, you're not going to be able to invest in support. It is wise to take more time in putting scaffolding like a postnuptial agreement in,
Mhm.
and or investing in therapy,
Right.
conversations with financial
So that you're
advisors.
prepared financially for catastrophe.
Correct.
Yes. So that was another question that came in. So I'm glad that we just handled that one. And then another question that came in was about keeping your identity when you become a stay-at-home mom. Um
A psalm. That's interesting. That feels very like sexual. Psalm.
Wait, have you never heard anyone say
I've
"some"?
literally, in 9 years of doing this, never heard anyone say some.
Wait, how do people say it?
A stay-at-home parent.
No, but like the
Some.
acronym.
Oh, yeah, I've never heard someone say the acronym
Really?
before. I love it.
Stop.
No,
It's so
amazing.
fun. I mean, it kinda sounds like a sommelier.
Yeah, it
Uh,
actually sounds kind of the way you said it sounded like French and elevated.
I feel like I only ever hear people say
A
that.
somme?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it is funny because it's like a funny spelling. Okay, anyway, keeping your own identity as a stay-at-home mom. How do we do that? And also, let's, I think, first just like distinguish a stay-at-home mom versus a stay-at-home mom who has help. Is there
Mhm.
a distinction in your mind?
I have a hard time drawing lines around that,
Mhm.
because I think that is a myth that holds a lot of women back, including myself, from investing in support.
Mhm.
We don't have to struggle through motherhood.
Mhm.
And if women have the resources and ability to invest in their care and invest in a full and healthy household in whatever way, whether that's outsourcing meals or outsourcing laundry or outsourcing childcare during the hours of
Yeah.
9 to 3, whatever
Mhm.
that is. If they identify with the role of being an at-home parent because their focus of their day-to-day is caregiving in the multitude of ways, I don't like to draw lines around it because I think our culture loves to put people in boxes.
Yeah.
With stay-at-home mother is a flawed box in and of itself, right? Because stay at home suggests like shut in and forever counted out because of the tropes that we've assigned to it
Right.
for decades, right? Working mom, if you poll the American public on what a stay-at-home mom is, they'll say June Cleaver, which is the wife from Leave It to Beaver, which is a show from the 1960s. And they say Michelle Obama for working mother, right? Like when in reality, like you and I talked about, more of us exist in between than ever before.
Mhm.
1 in 3 working mothers right now are considering a pause in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 are considering a downshift, and 90% of at-home parents are considering returning to work.
And also there's remote like never before because of
Remote
COVID.
freelance consulting entrepreneurship, right? I really, from the drop off to pick up entrepreneur, right? The woman working during the school day. There's so many interesting variations. More of us exist in that gray area as opposed to this like black and white box. And I think as soon as we then layer on this other division of like a stay at home mom with help and a stay at home mom without help, well, what about the stay at home mom who has a husband that comes home at 5 p.m. and a stay at home mom whose husband travels out of the country for 5 out of 7 days, right? There's too much nuance. There's too much gray. Help is a privilege that we should invest in if we have the
Mhm.
capacity and we need or want to.
Mhm.
Um, I think from there, identity is we've assigned so much identity to what we do for work, right? Even when we ask, what do you
Well,
do?
especially in a place like New York City.
Especially in New York, though it's universal. You ask, what do you do? It stands in with, who are you?
Mhm.
So I used to respond with, I run brand at a tech startup, which, like, in a few words, I run, which is a leadership brand, it's somewhat creative tech. You're like kind of ahead of the curve, right? Like you've conveyed so much about yourself. And so I encourage women to really think about right now, like two powerful words. I get to where I am with my kids. Like that's what you're spending. And I'm exploring what comes next.
Mhm.
Or and I'm working on a project alongside, or and I'm volunteering
Wait, so
and I'm
like
taking a class in writing, or
mhm.
leaving room for that multi-hyphenated identity, because this is not like, it might be a career pause, but it's not a life pause. You're still growing as a human being.
Will you just say that one more time? Like, as in, I'm gonna ask you, we're at a dinner party, and I'm like, Neha, what do you do?
Hmm.
And let's say,
This was
you're
5 years ago. Yeah.
exactly. How are you responding to that? And I'm asking you this because I think it's gonna be really helpful for a stay-at-home mom
Hmm.
listening who maybe feels like attacked by that question when it's
Hmm.
not an attack, but how do you say it in a way that you are proud of and feels good to you?
Well, I'll tell you what's worse is not being asked. And I think so often people who gauge someone as potentially on a career break don't ask because they don't wanna make them feel
Mm,
uncomfortable. So by doing that, we're count and I've been not asked before.
right.
So I spend a lot of time on the scripts around this, and I think the right now is really powerful. I get to, if it is a choice, or I am with my kids. We'll see what comes next.
I love that.
Or
Right now I'm with my kids, we'll see what happens
yeah,
next.
casual.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't have to be a title to speak to the fact that you are still a human being
Mhm.
doing something that you're interested in
Right.
and that's exciting to you, and you're exploring your options.
I actually think that we should take away the stay at home from
Correct.
the whole thing, right? Like
Correct.
the stay at home part is creepy. It's like recluse. It's like a recluse vibe because that's not anyone's situation. Like
It,
most quote unquote stay at home moms I know are taking their kids out and doing this and taking them to the park. You know what I mean? It's like they're home when there's a moment to be home or when there's a nap, but
no, the language is so flawed, and it's
yeah.
such an interesting place to be like rebranding this idea, but using it because it is the vernacular,
Right. And there's
right?
no
So I have
choice.
to say, we are rebranding stay at home. By nature of the work I do, I have to talk about it, but I hate the terminology because it is
Totally.
literally implies being stuck in one place
No,
when
it's the worst.
what we know is that you're growing, like your leadership skills, if you've ever fought with a toddler, your
Right.
empathy, your communication, your time management, your efficiency. But beyond that, in the fringe hours, most women, 90%, have their hand in something else, right? Like they're volunteering, they're taking an online class, they're part of a networking group like the ones we talked about, or they're
Mhm.
working on a small project. It's just such a more dynamic archetype than the one
Mhm.
we've been fed.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. And then this person asked, and this is so now we're kind of talking about these questions are coming from like working moms.
Mhm.
Again, like another
Yeah, like, are you
ridiculous.
really if I
Yeah,
said,
like
"What do you do?" Are you gonna say, "I'm a working mom?"
yeah, that's ridiculous. Like whatever. From moms who are in the corporate world. Let's call it that for now. This person said, how to cope with baby FOMO and needing control when you're at work.
Mm,
And this is really funny because my husband is has baby FOMO and needs control, and he's at work. And
funny.
it's really interesting. Like we are in the process of dropping to one nap, and any mom knows this is like the biggest transition when it comes to naps. And he is micromanaging the shit out of it, everything. Like he's texting me from work being like, "Okay, so now you're going to do this." And I'm like, "What? You need to like choose a lane, dude. Like either like do your work or be home and like do the nap. Like you cannot, and I feel like um
Wait, first of all, I love him. I love his commitment to the cause. That's
so
impressive.
it's a blessing and a curse, let me tell you. But, for a woman in my husband Steven's situation, it's like, how do you stop doing that?
Mm. In the childcare chapter, because we'll get into sort of the flawed beliefs around not investing in help, part of it is knowing and accepting that it's okay for your child to learn that they are safe in other adults' care. Right? Like it is actually Tova Klein is the psychologist I interviewed for that chapter. And I wish I'd heard her advice 9 years ago when I
Mm,
grappled with getting help because she said, your child doesn't need one single caregiver. They need to know they're loved by their one singular caregiver, but they need to also know they're safe in a capacity of environments and they're actually learning so many new and interesting ways to live by being exposed to other people. And
mhm.
actually, if we let in other people to care for our child, their lives are richer for it. They're safer for it. I can speak to this. I grew up, we had immigrated to the country when I was 3. So my parents just didn't have childcare. And I was terrified. I was terrified something was going to happen to my parents. And so it infuses so much safety into my children
Mm,
to know that they never have to fear, like, what if something happens to mom?
that's so
And
true.
and I think that is, I think knowing that surpasses the sort of minutia of the day to day. I would also say if you do work from home, try and get out of the house when the caregiver's in charge. If you need that
Mhm,
sort of physical
mhm.
boundary to allow them the physical space to be on. And if there is something you care, pick the things you care about, right? Outside time. And then, have a sit down conversation with the
Mhm.
caregiver about
Yeah.
that and make that clear. But in terms of sort of what they're eating, how they're like all the things, you kind of have to take off the worry buffet and know that by being exposed to that, your children are actually getting stronger
It's
for it.
so true, and I love that shift. I forgot who it was, but I was having this conversation once with someone who was like, I was so annoyed because my son or my daughter or whatever was like running and hugging our nanny like more than they did with me, let's say, right? And I remember being like, "What? That's amazing." Like,
Mhm.
I don't think you realize how
What a
bad it would
gift.
be for it to be the opposite. What if your kid was terrified of your nanny? Like, what would that first of all, what would that imply? But second of all, what a gift.
Mm.
What a gift that your child loves their child, like whoever's taking care of them, that you're not going anywhere. Like you are with them forever. They're going to love you. You are the number one. Like no one is coming in front of you. But what a gift for them to feel love for more than just you.
And to feel safe.
And to
with
feel safe.
because I'll be honest with you, I'm spending more time out of the home, especially getting, with the book launch and the I watch my daughter's life. Like her face lights up when her babysitter, who's an NYU grad, actress who's just so funny, they giggle and they laugh and they have inside jokes. There's not a part of me that feels envious because I'm so happy her life is full of someone who makes her laugh when I'm
Yeah.
not there.
Yeah.
Right. That, my daughter has taken an affinity for acting in the recent 6 months. And I guarantee you that's because of her incredible babysitter. Right. Because I'm not particularly funny or a great actress. Like that is,
Totally.
she is picking up on these incredible new skills and interests
Mm.
because of the people in her orbit beyond me. And I think there was a sort of a selfishness in early motherhood that I experienced where I just wanted to be the person because it feels so exciting.
Right.
And I think when we realize that their worlds are naturally going to open up, it's really relieving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that selfishness, it's like you can't fight it. I find that with me, it started with the breastfeeding
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, I'm the only one that can feed my child. Like no
Mm-hmm.
one else can. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like and you get very like empowered from it. And it's like but then like how great would it be if your husband could feed him a bottle? Like that's okay and actually really necessary sometimes.
It's so
But it's
funny the
like
things we choose. I did not
uh-huh.
have that with feeding. I had it with pushing the stroller in public.
Oh, I had that too. I had that
Which is
too. We would fight about it.
which is so sad to admit because I'm like, why? What was so? But I remember my like much younger sister-in-law pushing it in Central Park or no,
Uh-huh.
Madison Square Park, and I remember being like, oh no, they won't know it's mine. Like it's
Uh-huh.
my baby, And it's
Yep.
just I look back and think like, gosh, I should have just taken the win and
So
like gone and
funny.
gotten a coffee.
Right, right. Well, I did that with my husband, which obviously no one thought that it was his, he was the mom, but um I was just like, I've waited for this moment for so
It
long. Like I'm pushing this fucking stroller.
does. It does. It's so
Um
bizarre. So bizarre.
it's so funny. It's like you really can't. But then like oddly enough, when it came to family and friends, I was like, take my baby. Like I was never
Ah, possessive.
possessive with my son. But when it came to like the things that I wanted to do, like,
Right.
feeding him or pushing the stroller, it was like, that's like he needs me for that, you know? It's just
Mm-hmm.
weird. You never know how you're gonna feel. Um, okay, going back to people's questions. How do you handle missing your old career life if you ever had those moments?
There's so much of your careers that you're allowed to grieve. I talk about this in the first chapter. You're allowed to sort of mourn that sense of identity and all this. And then when you sort of part with that and you think, well, what are the parts of that I want to take with me? Right? Maybe it's you really love research about women. Right?
Mhm.
And maybe you can set aside 15 minutes each day to read like the top 3 industry blogs that you loved or some part of that work life that you can stay connected to in a small way. If it was your colleagues, can you set up once a quarter a meeting or a coffee or some sort of way in which to stay connected to them that way? Again, I go back to a career pause is not a career ender. And there's a way in which you can bring with you both the skills, right? Take stock of all the accomplishments, write them down. So many people forget to do this, me included. Write your resume when you leave or like update your LinkedIn because those
Mhm.
accomplishments will disappear. Giving yourself a moment to acknowledge everything you did, right? Have a coffee with the mentors you loved or the mentees you loved. Be able to nurture all of that and recognize it and then say, what part of this do I want to bring with me? What part am I fine to let go? And then figure out, and I think this is the really interesting part, when the women who come to the platform and say, I feel stuck or I feel lost. A lot of it is because we forget that we get to still have goals now and still carve out little ways to keep our professional or creative selves going.
Mhm.
And so, if it's maintain X or Y part of your professional identity, find the small ways in which to do that work in this
Yeah.
stage of life.
Yeah, and I also feel like to your point about like, reading the articles or whatever, when our moms or grandmas or whoever it was, if they were stay-at-home moms, their day consisted of being with the kid and, like, not having other influences, not being able to read stuff unless it was, like, the paper, and not being able to communicate unless they, like, had a phone call with a friend, but now we are so plugged in,
Mm,
it's almost like we can still be dynamic stay-at-home moms because one of my fears of being a stay-at-home mom, and again, it's not like anyone's forcing me to be a stay-at-home mom, just like a hesitation that that was like instilled in me before anything was like, you're gonna be boring as fuck.
mm,
Like you're gonna go to the
mhm,
double
mhm,
date and everyone's gonna be like, and this and that. And you're gonna be like, and he stood up today. And
mm,
like it was, and no one's gonna give a fuck.
right,
Like that
right.
was like a fear I had. And now it's like, "No, no, no, you're still as plugged in as your husband is who's at work."
Mhm.
Like,
And
this
sometimes more so.
and sometimes more
Because
so.
I'll be honest with you, so we talked a little bit about goals, right? Because once you prepare and you do the budgeting and you resign and you network on the way out and you make peace with the identity and recognize that you're still ambitious and all the tropes about stay at home mother are false, right? And so instead, we're rewriting this as I'm on a career pause for family life and I can't wait to see. Once you then step into it, you get to be intentional about how you use your time. You've already parted with the ego with your work.
Mm,
So what else can you now do that isn't like, oh, I'm only in pursuit of a salary bump or a promotion or,
mhm,
some sort of metric for my own business. Actually, like now I have some time to figure out like what does success really look like for me right now? And that's a really, the way I did that was I literally wrote out in great detail what I wanted my life to look like in 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And not that my life exactly mapped to it, but it started to reveal like, huh, I really want to be a calm person. I wonder like what part of myself I have to heal to get there, like
mhm,
belonging, reactivity. And so on a personal front, I really started to take that seriously as a real
mhm.
personal deep goal that while I couldn't do it every single day, I was like, well, what's something that could fit in my life?
Right.
Like for chapter, it was therapy. For chapter, it was listening to a personal development podcast every week. Then it became a 5-minute meditation. On a professional front, it was I'd always loved content. I'd always loved women's interest. And so I started a blog, even though everyone in their world was like, oh, cute. She has a little blog. But I was
Yeah.
like, this is my time. I'm going to write 3 blog posts a week on the
Mhm.
topic of work and family. I'm going to interview it. This is my way to keep learning.
Right.
And it was small, but it worked.
Mhm.
And from like a family goal perspective, I said, like, I want a silly household. I didn't grow up in a super silly household and I want one. So can we have a dance party every Monday? Right. It was
Mhm.
like measurable ways. And I break it into those 3 categories measurable ways to give myself goals because goals make you still feel like you're moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like we're going so hard for the stay-at-home mom, which I love.
Mm,
But I also want to give the working mom a moment for a second. And you said something to me actually that stuck with me that I shared with my husband because I loved so much. And it was, if you're a working mom and you don't get like you're like, "Oh my god, I don't get, I'm missing out or I don't get the time." You had said to me, and tell like I'm going to mess
mhm.
this up, so correct me, it doesn't matter, necessarily time spent, the kids aren't measuring how long you're spending with them. It's when you're with them, what you're bringing, like, the demeanor, your demeanor and, like, how you are when you are with them in that moment is what they remember. Can you kind of I butchered it, but can you kind of repeat it the way that you said it to me?
So I tell everyone to read Stuart Friedman's article in Harvard Business Review. It's called How Our Careers Actually Impact Our Children,
Mhm.
because it will break down all the research that I've talked about for years that says it does not matter whether your child has a stay-at-home parent or a work out of home parent or a work from home parent. All that matters is that they have a parent who loves them, that they feel safe and loved by a single caregiver, right? And a single parent in theory. 2 parents bonus, great. The idea that we have created where one creates secure attachment and one models ambition, right? Like I think that is the heart of the mommy wars, right? If you go back in time to the 1970s where we started to see it, it was second wave feminism, which did so much, but we wanted to prove our capacity in the workforce. And then women who were at home became associated with defending tradition and like fondling Tupperware. And then in the 80s, because media loves a catfight, we pitted the both sides against each other and we made women get really defensive about their choices. So, what do you do when you get defensive? You dig your feet in. And women at home said, well, we're staying at home because it creates secure attachment for our children. And then women at working out of the home said, like, well, we're modeling ambition and financial power for our children. And like, if we make it about the kids, we immediately don't like each other. Like that, when in reality, we're all making choices that work for us right now. And if we can just
Mhm.
own the choice, what we know is that secure attachment is found in a multitude of scenarios. And there is
Right.
absolutely no research to say that it is better in one scenario versus another. And children value presence over anything. And
Mhm.
Tova Klein, in the chapter around help, said to me, what children are best served by is a parent who's not only present, but who's whole and happy. So, whatever we can do to create whole and fulfilling lives for our entire family, including ourselves, the better our children are for it.
Yeah. Yeah. You did a lot better than me at that.
No.
Um, my mom was a stay-at-home mom,
Mm.
and I called her this morning because I was like, I'm having this amazing woman on my podcast, and I am curious, because I was curious, and she didn't really like the answer is not worth us discussing because she didn't really give me much. But I said, did you and my dad have a conversation about like budget when you decided to be a stay-at-home mom? Like, was he like, here's what you should spend, or like, just do you? And she was like, we never had a conversation about budget. Like, not once. We never spoke about it. She was like, obviously we knew like our roles and whatever, but we never had a conversation about budget. And he never told me no for like spending on the kids and like you guys and things like that. He only told me no for like Saks and like Bergdorf's and stuff like that. Sometimes like not no, but like slow down. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good for her.
and I was like, that's really interesting. And her whole thing is the reason that she became a stay-at-home mom was because her mom worked, and her mom was one of those like dig your feet in, and she felt like she didn't get to see her mom,
Mm.
which is like really honestly kind of like annoying to hear that someone could feel that way. But I don't know if that makes sense. Like
Mhm,
that's annoying to
mhm,
hear. I guess
mhm.
because I
I
go
know
work.
what you mean,
Yeah.
because especially as someone who's trying to find you're always evolving balance between you that's a fear, right?
Right.
That your child would ever look back and think that. That's
Totally.
fearful.
Exactly.
Now, I would
But
also say she
yeah,
probably had a different relationship with
she
her
did. She
mother
did.
that had less to do with the career
Correct.
and more about how she felt as a priority.
Mhm.
And there are many ways to make your child feel like a priority.
You're spot on. And my thought to, my grandma's not with us anymore, but to like defend her, I'm like, maybe she was happiest, whole and happy. Maybe she was really happy working. And that's like,
And I would add in that generation, I'm going to assume how old your grandmother is, there was less room to mix motherhood and work.
Mhm.
Right? You are doing work right now. I'm doing work and we are talking boldly about motherhood. That did not exist.
Right, right.
So Betty Friedan, who everyone talks about, like the Great Feminist Manifesto, is the feminine mystique. What people and which cast a lot of shame on stay-at-home motherhood, right? But she went on to write a book that no one talks about called The Second Stage, where she talks about how she feels like they missed out on family. They didn't talk about like the great miss of the feminist movement at that point in the 1970s was they just forgot about family. They created such a sort of separation that the two could not coexist.
Mm.
And I think that's what we are doing in such a beautiful way. I think we're figuring it out. And so there's a messy in between. But even when we talk about stay at home and working, I hesitate because I really do believe that our generation is the one who got married later. So our marriages are set up differently to have those equitable conversations in a way the
Mhm.
generation prior didn't have. We had education and work experience before. We're retiring later. Even retirees are more connected to
Right.
work, right? It's just such a more long and fluid game.
Right. And I feel like that answer is that there is no right answer. Like I know that might be frustrating for people to hear, but there's no perfect way to be a parent. And like you're not right for being a stay-at-home mom and you're not right for being a working mom and you're doing what's best for you
And your family,
and
right?
your family. And by the way, that's why just parenting is so can be so frustrating at times because, you know, for example, my sister has older kids and I feel like there's judgment always coming from her about certain things that I do. And, I say this to her face. It's not like she's hearing this
Mhm,
for the first
mhm.
time. And it's just, that's just my sister. So I can't even imagine what like friends and whoever, there's always people are going to be judging each other. But the reality is, every child is different with different needs.
And every family is different with different needs.
Correct. And
We
there's no
cannot.
uniform. Oh my God. We
So
went,
exciting.
I can't believe it's already
I mean, what
time.
time is it?
It's 12:34.
Okay.
But Wolf, are we good to keep going for a little? Okay. Okay. If that's
Well,
okay with
yeah,
you.
I'm fine.
Um, so it's just you can't before you judge someone, try who's a mom, because that's our favorite game. Try to understand that maybe they are doing what's right for their kid, and maybe your kid wouldn't benefit from it.
And try to get curious about why and try and learn,
Mhm.
like, about what made that choice right for them, and also trust that it doesn't make your choice less good for you. Because
Exactly.
we don't judge. I mean, one of the best lessons I think from the stage in life has been when people judge or criticize, it has less to do with your choice and it has more to
Everything to do with
do
theirs.
with them making sense of their choices,
Right,
right? And I
always.
and I think back to the decision to initially downshift and the decision to pause, and I think about some of the women
Mm,
who commented about me giving up in some way, and it was them reconciling their own
right,
choices,
or maybe being jealous or maybe just feeling some type of
feeling
way.
some type of way and making sense of it. And I think when you are able to separate from that, and when you recognize and have empathy for them going through this learning curve,
Mhm.
you build a trust in yourself to make bold decisions over and over again. Because once you are mothering children, you realize you're the only person who really knows what they need or want. No one else can tell you the formula isn't good or breastfeeding is only good. You like no one else knows. So you practice this superpower of making the right choice without everyone else's approval, which for me was like the ultimate gift.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to ask your opinion on this whole trad wife culture.
Mm. Harrison Butker had made, do you
Yes.
remember him?
Of course, the guy who made the speech.
Yeah, the guy who made the speech, who should have never been handed a microphone. He made a speech and it sort of compounded the whole trad wife hashtag. And I
Glorified.
want to talk about it as a hashtag and not a movement. The reality is, these are few and far between women who, by the way, are making money off of
Well, I
this,
was gonna say
right?
the
Like
the main
the main
the
one, she is
poster
rolling in
children,
it.
the poster women for trad wives are actually working women. So the irony is
Correct.
not lost.
What they have figured out is that beautiful pictures sell on Instagram. This came at a moment in time where the culture is facing immense burnout, right? We're seeing a lot of loneliness. We're seeing people re examining how much money is enough money. There's this like penchant and desire for slow living. What they did was they took that and they monetized it
Mhm.
and they labeled it with trad wife. And my fear in that is it starts to do what I'm trying to it starts to go back to yesteryear with a portrait of the stay-at-home mom as defending tradition and being shut in their home baking bread and wearing an apron. And there's
By
nothing wrong
from
with baking
scratch, by
bread,
the way, from
and there's
scratch.
nothing wrong with aprons if that's your thing. But it is to say that what we want to create with the Power Pause is a replacement for a tired, tropey archetype. Because as we've talked about, all women want are more choices that work for them in the season that they're in, because it's all evolving and it's all shifting and it's a long game. And we need to get past the sort of black and white boxes and just make the choices for right now. And
Mhm.
so all I can say is that's a very small percentage of women on career breaks. And the reality is they're not even on career breaks. They're just making a killing off of everyone worrying about them.
Totally, totally. And okay, we probably only have time for like two more. I guess we kind of talked about this, but it's like how to get over your fear if you decide to be a stay-at-home mom that you'll be judged from working moms who do it all.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about this in the context of judgment in the end being everyone making sense of choices in their own way. And when you separate from that choice and when you do that work to recognize that judgment is more of a reflection on the other person and less on your choice,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
practice the skill of owning that we're all making choices at any given time, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot about right now I get to focus on this, right? I'm letting go of that and I'm embracing that it's a long game. So I'll use the example of right now when I'm working much more out of the home, right? Right now, I'm focusing on putting this book out in the world. I'm letting go of doing arts and crafts and doing pickup every day. And I trust that it's a long game of life and parenting.
Mhm.
And I did the same when I was at home.
Right.
Right now, I'm letting go of a lot of outward career progression. I get to have more time with my kids and grow
Right. The whole
personally,
"I
and we'll
get
see what
to" is
happens.
really helpful. Like, "I get to, not I have to," is, like, one of my favorite things. It's
Mhm.
like, "I get to work out today. I don't have to go to my workout class. I get to." Like, that just shift in speak alone is so helpful. Um, and then I think maybe we'll end on this one, but then I'm gonna ask you something else after. But, I briefly mentioned, like, the conversation with my parents about the
Mm.
spending and the things like that. A lot of the questions that came up were like, how do you not like, how are you feel like, how to not feel a type of way about spending their money?
Mm. This idea of a joint household income is really
And that I love, but at
but
the end of the day, like, at least, and I'm just speaking about me, I don't know how
mm,
other moms would feel, but I would still be like, "I have to get permission," or like, "This isn't
mm,
mine," or,
mm,
like, "I wanna spend this.
mm,
I wanna stay at the nicer hotel,"
mhm,
but, like, I don't have a leg to stand on.
mm. It really starts with being an equal financial partner in the conversation and getting very clear on the contribution you're making. And if it takes reading data and research about breaking down your roles and tasks, I've had women break out a spreadsheet of every single task that they do, even the intangible ones, right? Like texting and curating a social network for their kids and a social network for their partner and kin keeping, which is the word for like sending a gift to your mother in law, like all of
Oh,
the
I didn't know there was a
things.
word for
Oh,
that.
yes,
This is
there's a
very
word for
helpful.
everything.
Mhm.
Um, when you start to write it all out, you recognize how much value it's providing to the household
Mhm.
in creating a happy and healthy household. And from there, when you're assigning budgets and you're coming to the table to say, this is what we're both doing to contribute to our home, you're standing in this recognition of my work has value, even if it doesn't have pay.
Mhm.
But that does have to be that mindset walking into it, and it can be hard, and it is disruptive to every belief we've been given, and it takes an self-education on the worth.
Mhm.
I mean, it takes moving through the day-to-day of doing it and realizing how much hard work goes into it,
Mhm.
uh, to really absorb that belief.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of communication. It can take therapy, it can take communication with a couples therapist, right? But the goal is not to trip and fall into that stage of life and then feel like, "Oh, I don't have access to money."
Mhm.
Either because my partner isn't giving me access to money or I don't feel the right to.
Right.
It takes sort of that preemptive thinking and planning
Mhm.
for we are making a conscious shift as a household unit because we're making a family relocation because of someone's job,
Mhm.
right? Or my partner's job is around the clock and someone needs to be the safety net in
Right.
the colossal number of school holidays,
Right.
whatever that is,
Uh-huh.
that sort of mutual agreement needs to happen
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah. And I just lost my train of
And
thought.
knowing that it's for right now. right? I
Mhm.
think both partners need to know they're not trapped into this arrangement that works for the family,
Right.
and they can come back and work part-time.
Right.
If it's feeling, say you went through a year on a career sabbatical for family life. By the way, I'm going to call it that, not stay home. You're on a career sabbatical for a lot of family life. You're at home with your kids for a while. And a year in, you're like, I really just miss having income. Then is there a way to get back into freelance or consulting or part-time work that works for you? The advocacy is not to be at home if it's not working for you. And if you're feeling financially disempowered, it's not working for you.
Mhm.
There are ways to minimize that downside so that
Mhm.
you can really be able to unlock the opportunity in it.
Mhm. I like what you said though about being involved in the finances. I personally don't want to be involved in
Mm.
the finances, even as someone who brings in.
Hmm.
But I think about like these women who are married to these guys who have like Ponzi schemes and like get arrested for tax evasion and like they have no idea. And we're always like, how do they not know? Like, how do they not know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because of women who, like me, I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to do the taxes and I like, I'd rather you handle it. You know what I mean? But to push yourself to know what the hell is going on financially, especially if you're a mom who's taking care of the household, that is crucial, I think.
And then you can walk through it with financial dignity
Uh-huh.
and an awareness. And that's funny you say that because now I reflect back to when I was working full time and I didn't have as much. Dan would really push to treat our household
Yes,
like with the financial P&L
totally.
and L and the
Steven does it
model. And I
too, and I'm
remember
like,
being
"Ugh,
like, you're such a nerd. This
yeah,
is so
uh-huh,
unnecessary. Like, I just want to watch Law and Order SVU, which I no longer watch because we have to stop once you have kids.
yeah,
And I did not get involved
mhm,
until I had a stake and my stake felt bigger when I
right,
parted with my income.
right, that's so interesting, and by the way, you can totally watch SVU.
Oh no, it's too much for me now. It's too much.
Oh, 'cause you get sad.
I only watch happy content. So like
I
shrinking feels
see.
like okay, I can do that. Ted
Okay.
Lasso, good.
That's so funny because I still, like, need my murder stuff.
I know you do, which
I
is why I think you should read The Sicilian Inheritance by Joe Piazza.
and it's gonna make me wanna watch only positive things?
No, 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 no.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
like a really good murder
Okay,
mystery.
okay, okay, okay. I'm gonna read it. This was so much fun. I don't know how an hour flew by so quickly. I feel like everyone's gonna be like, "You need to keep having this conversation," so I'm hoping we have a part 2. And Neha, can you leave us with a piece of advice or like a quote from the book or something that just really, stuck with you and sticks with you to this day?
When I read my audiobook, when I got to the conclusion, I got tearful because there was a line I wrote, and I remember where I was when I wrote it. My son was doing his homework, and I was writing the last couple lines. And I was reflecting on at the beginning of that school year, Lila, my younger one, said, why do you have to work why can't you just do that while I'm at school and then pick me up? And I say in the book that if I do this work well, when she grows up and someone asks her, was your mother a working mom or a stay at home mom? She won't know how to answer that or what that means. She'll just know I was whole and I was there.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Hmm.
I love that. Where can everyone find the book and read it and follow you?
You can find the book anywhere you love to get books, and you can follow me at Mother Untitled on Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was so great.
I